Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, and I'm resuming this drawing that I introduced last week. Well, kind of introduced. It's part of the longest-running animation that I've been working on ever since I got Opentoonz. But really, this is the first time I've really taken it seriously with the background. Even when I initially drew it, I was just trying to slapstick something together just to show, hey, yeah, I can animate. But you know, it's best to put your best, it's smartest to put your best foot forward and publicize your work with the better end of the quality that you can produce. And so that's some of the reason why I'm refining this background quite substantially. Also, some of the reason why, like earlier in my previous video in the series, with the speed painting series, a path back to Opentoonz, I said that the file size got so big. One of the reasons I believe the file size got so big and it just wound up being so RAM intensive is just simply that the background was initially made with 100% vectors, and I don't know what the deal is with that right now. Because you look at some really rather old animations that have been on the internet for quite some time, like Bitey Castle. Like, honestly, that the whole Brackenwood stories and such like that, I'm a huge fan of, and I wish so bad that the series could finally get some sort of resolution to it, find out where the whole story was heading towards and all that. But anyways, you watch those cartoons and you see the backgrounds, and they're all 100% vector work. And so I thought that I could do the same, but you know, I don't think that. I think that pretty much all the vectors on the screen were all just the size of the canvas, as big as the camera. I don't think that there was really much to the background that exceeded the size of say, the camera. And so I have just this massive background that the camera can navigate around, and so I think that really too many vectors. It was just too many vectors to really for the computer to keep track of at all times, and it just lagged out too much. And so that's another reason why I'm refining this background. Even though it's not a bunch of vector work like how I initially wanted it to be, it's going to be a higher quality sort of image, but it's all going to be rasters. I keep trying to do these shortcuts where I can go ahead and just copy and paste a specific, like previously in my previous video I was talking about objects that are in a row. Okay, objects that are of the same kind, all in a row. I keep trying to do these shortcuts where I grab an object and I move it, and then I try to warp it to the perspective that it would adjust to up above throughout actually that's the majority of this video, actually, where I'm trying to do that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There's, you know, I believe that there's, especially with the sketch, like, you want a fair amount of accuracy in your drawing, but in a sketch especially, you know, there is a variance that you can get away with. You don't necessarily have to just follow everything as gospel. The grid can you can have some variance from the grid, but I guess I'll really know for sure once I start actually cleaning up this image with the assistant tool and using the fisheye perspective assistant to try to refine this image. I'll know then just how effective I am being by sketching it out like this. One regret that I have is initially in the first video in this series, I got the original image and then I blew it up to a massive size. I should have kept it at a smaller size, refined all the lines to a much smaller grid and everything like that would fit to it, and just really quickly get everything done, rather than trying to like, by the time that I would blow the image up to full size and everything like that, it would have just about every little element that I want. So sketches, like I am learning how to use a graphics tablet at this point. I've always drawn with pencil and paper, and though there are a lot of advantages to working on a digital canvas, it just seems like there is a very big learning curve if all you've drawn is on a piece of paper and pencil. And so to me, it just seems like I'm watching all these tutorials about how people draw with a graphics tablet, and one of the methods that I've noticed quite a bit is they start out small. They draw out a quick sketch with the image being rather small, and then they blow up its size quite substantially. They just transform it and make it really big. And once it's big, you know, then they can start doing their nice little refinements. And from what I can see, it's usually something like a 3-step process. A rough draft, then a sketch, then the final product, the actual inking process. And really, it doesn't matter how many steps or processes it is, as long as it gets done at a reasonable amount of time. That's my philosophy. And at this point in time, like I look at the 2 speed painting series that I've got going on. One that I still have yet to give a name. I'm thinking about changing the title of the series where it's just the Urban Street. In fact, I might just call it Urban Street Speed Paint, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, and etc. But anyways, like I even worked on that at full size. And so here's this sketch. It's enormous, and I'm zooming in, zooming out, zooming in, zooming out. And whereas if I did it all on basically a thumbnail, it would have been a lot easier. Earlier I mentioned that you can make a really long line that spans the size of a the size of an entire building, a massive building, just by zooming out and doing a quick little, stroke of the stylus. But really, you need to be careful with that when you have a full-sized image, because there's so many pixels that the computer is trying to account for. And so even though it looks good when you're zoomed out, when you zoom in, you can see that, well, the line's okay, but it's not where I want it to be. It's like 40 pixels away from where I need it to be. And so I wind up doing this little crosshatch thing. If I had done it as a thumbnail, as a much smaller image, like maybe even a quarter to a tenth the size of the final size that is actually the picture is actually going to be, I think that the sketching process would have been done much faster, and I could have done a lot more of it from a distance, zoomed out quite a bit, because it's not trying to account for thousands and thousands and thousands of pixels when it's just a thumbnail. So that's something to keep in mind. So learn from my mistake. At this point, I'm pretty committed. It's not like I'm gonna shrink down the image at this point into a thumbnail and start adjusting things. I'm just going to continue where I left off. Now, above this, I guess it's a storefront. I have these little columns that come up that are made of brick and such like that kind of extrude out, and I just drew like maybe 4 different brick, and if you've been watching carefully, you would notice that I just copied those brick and then pasted them up, And then I was really carefully looking at the grid, making sure that the joints, which is basically the mortar in between each brick, that the joints are fitting or matching up with the alignment of the grid. And by and large they did, and I did a little bit of touch-up. And then once I got one column finished, I went ahead and just selected it, copied it, and pasted it. And I found that the initial attempt that I had to do this, I made a lot of errors. And early on, while making this video actually, somehow my guideline layer got mixed up with my sketch layer. And so I really don't understand what happened, honestly. It's as if all my sketch work was on my guideline layer along with some of my guidelines, and my sketch layer had the majority of my guidelines, which makes no sense to me. I don't know how that happened. I really don't. And so at this point, I'm just compensating for that error. I'm erasing all this crap that is unpredictable because I don't know what's necessarily on my sketch layer anymore. And so I relabeled the original guideline layer into being sketch, and then I changed my initial sketch layer to being guidelines. And so it's just trying to work through a weird complication. And here I'm starting to notice a problem. The spacing between the columns are uneven, even though I did all these measurement lines, and it just doesn't look right. And there comes a point where I realize, oh, I didn't account for something. You see, this portion, there's this portion of the storefront on the first floor. It extrudes out. It extrudes out more than the upper portion of the building, and there's basically this wall that makes it so that, well, it's kind of hard to really point out. I'll let you know exactly what it is that I'm doing, so that I don't have to describe it and confuse you. But right here you see me drawing these guidelines. I'm even curving my guidelines to kind of get an idea. But you can see here I put this guideline right here, and I see that it still doesn't work. It still doesn't seem to line up properly. And so what I realize is, okay, well, there's this extrusion, so I'm not accounting for the extrusion. So I grab my guideline layer, and so I start kind of drawing where the roof of this extrusion happens to be. And I go ahead and I make basically a square so that I can create some accurate measurement lines. And so now I know the full size of this portion of this building that is inset, that isn't extruding out, and so now I can properly line up my columns. And I also try to align all of the joints. You see that this guideline right here is to make sure that the first joint that is visible on each column will align. And if you align those to be at the same height, theoretically, all the other joints should line up all the way up. And so that's something that I was considering throughout the whole thing. So I spent so much time trying to get this right the first time, and then as you can see, like, this last column kind of winds up getting hidden behind the wall where basically this little display is. Usually inside of these sorts of displays you see something like a mannequin standing in the window or something. And so I had to account for that, had to make it look real nice and everything. So happy day. I mean, I got this portion of it done. One thing that I've noticed is I know when I need to, like, call it quits on a specific drawing for either a few hours or for the day, and usually it's when my lines get really sloppy and I just don't really care about what I'm doing. Like, you'll see it eventually, but here, like, you've already seen me kind of refine this window, but there's never any point where I'm fully satisfied with it. Like, although I am learning about perspective quite a bit and teaching curvilinear perspective. There is quite a bit about perspective that I still don't understand. One thing is, and it may sound like it's totally simple, especially if you're brand new to perspective, but if once you actually try it, you'll know what I mean. Basically, the window, the front-facing window, the one that I'm messing with right now on the screen, that window is a very specific size. Okay. Now the window that wraps around it, the one that I've been working on this window right here to the right, since it's wrapped around the building and now pointing towards a different vanishing point, the red vanishing point, it's hard to know exactly what horizontal length it should be, and I'm not really entirely sure at this point how I should figure that out. I'm sure there's ways to do it with measurement lines and using probably multiple different vanishing points. And the thing is, like, we're not dealing with 3-point perspective even. We're dealing with 5-point perspective. So I would imagine the layer of complexity to figure that out winds up getting substantially more complex. And here I made this kind of industrial dumpster, and I decided that yeah, you know, it's an alleyway and there's a fire escape there. Why not make it look a little bit ghetto and such like that? It's as if, like, this is something that I've noticed a lot, where the front of buildings will always tend to look pretty dignified and professional, but you walk in the back of the building and you can see just how professional that establishment happens to be. You can see just, you know, how they dispose of their trash and everything, and if there's cigarette butts everywhere and everything. And so, like, I imagine, I haven't actually been inside of a place like New York City, but I kind of imagine this is a place kind of like New York City, not necessarily New York itself, but kind of like it. And I would imagine, at least the way that it's portrayed inside of Hollywood and everything, that, you know, the storefronts look all nice and pristine, and then you walk down an alleyway in between two buildings, and probably a bunch of shady activities going on. Probably it's not quite as pristine and clean, and so there you have it. I did pose the question to myself: how is it that a trash man would come and dispose of the trash right here? I mean, yeah, again, I don't live in a place like New York, so do they get a forklift and then put it on the street and then have the garbage truck just hoist it in or something? I don't know, but I would imagine that's how they would use that industrial trash can in that alleyway. Now, I would think that they would want the industrial trash can out of view, but the thing is, like, if it was further down in the alley, you would think that it would make it even more difficult for a trash man to dispose of the trash. So, you know, these are all weird things that I thought about. And also right here, I went ahead and copied the building to the left and then flipped it and then placed it on the right building, thinking that I could just kind of use the warp, like go to the transform tool and then go into the tool options and select the warp option, ramp up how many nodes there are to warp it, and just get all the lines to line up to the perspective grid. However, what I learned was that was really stupid, and I just kind of wasted my time. But, you know, why not include, you know, an attempt at something inside of this video? You know, you win some, you lose some. You're never 100% sure about everything all the time, but yet you made, you know, at least you made the attempt. At least you know, okay, well, this is the wrong time to use this particular tool, and I've learned my lesson, so I'll never do that again with this tool. But I can use it in more compartmentalized areas. And that's exactly when the transform and warp option to the transform tool has actually been of a big help to me, just in compartmentalized areas, not in some massive scale like an entire building. Now at this point, for some reason I decided not to use a reference for this building. I'm still not quite sure if that was a mistake or not, but here I am. I'm just kind of sketching out a bunch of stuff with really sloppy lines with my guideline layer and everything. And I decided that, okay, well, in order for me to find the windows up above, I'm going to split the window on the first floor in half, and then I'm going to measure out 1/2 of the size of that window up, and that will signify like the space of the floor for the second floor and the height up towards the window. Okay, and then I measure 2 more half window lengths, and that will be the windows. That would be the height for the second floor windows. And so that seems like it was a really nice little technique to work with. I'm not really quite sure if it always works out. I don't know what I did wrong, but at the very tail end of this video, I try a similar sort of technique with the building to the left, and it just it doesn't work out at all. In fact, the windows on this on the I would say 3rd floor and 4th floor, they just got really squat. And so this kind of makes me wonder, okay, well, should my measurement lines be curved because it's curvilinear perspective, or should they not? I think if I'm measuring something horizontally, then I should have them the measurement lines curved, because that's the only thing that's actually being curvilinearized, things that are horizontal. But if I'm measuring up, nothing, like, there's no point in time where the camera is pointing up with cylindrical 4-point perspective. And so I think that my lines at that point, my measurement lines should be straight if I'm trying to measure up, if that makes sense. So that pretty much concludes it for at least the narrative of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's a little bit left in the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't, just please like, share, and subscribe anyways, and have a good day.